My name is Kayla Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the disappointment. The one who made different choices. The one who didn't follow the carefully paved path my family had laid out for me. The one they whispered about behind closed doors or laughed at over dinner, thinking I couldn't hear. But I always did. And tonight was the night they'd finally learn that I had been listening all along. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been called something that lit a fire inside you? And don't forget to like and subscribe to see how I turned their mockery into something unforgettable. I grew up in a tidy, upper-middle-class suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. My father, Gerald Morgan, was a respected real estate broker who valued appearances above everything. My mother, Elaine, worked in private healthcare and believed in routine, manners, and being proper. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My older brothers, Aaron and Patrick, followed the blueprint perfectly. Good schools, corporate jobs, respectable marriages, holiday cards that looked like magazine ads. I was different. I didn't want to work for someone else. I didn't dream of cubicles or power suits. Ever since high school, I wanted to build something of my own. Something meaningful. Something I could pour my soul into. I loved coffee. Not just the drink, but the ritual. The way a warm mug could soften a bad day. The way a quiet cafe could become a sanctuary. So I dreamed of opening my own coffee shop. They laughed at me. Coffee? You went to college for coffee? Kayla, be serious for once. This is a phase, right? You'll get over it. I didn't get over it. I saved every penny working multiple jobs. I skipped vacations, missed birthdays, and lived in a cramped studio apartment with peeling walls and leaky pipes just so I could put everything into what I believed in. Eventually, I found a small, run-down property in downtown Asheville and turned it into the Green Mug, a cozy cafe with velvet armchairs, local art, and playlists filled with jazz and acoustic guitar. When I invited my family to the grand opening, no one came. Not a single person. 2 years passed. I built a loyal customer base. Reviews were glowing. Locals called it their favorite place in town. We hosted poetry nights and book clubs. I introduced specialty blends and even started wholesaling beans. I wasn't rich, not yet, but I was finally doing what I loved. On my terms. But to my family, that didn't count. To them, success meant boardrooms, big paychecks, and being seen in the right circles. My brothers were real men, with real jobs. I was still playing entrepreneur in their eyes. So when my mother sent out the group message inviting everyone to the annual Morgan family Christmas dinner, an elegant gathering at my grandmother's mansion, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but the other part, the stronger part, saw an opportunity. I had been working on something in secret, something they didn't know, something that would change everything. The week before the dinner, I finalized the purchase of the entire building that housed the Green Mug. Not just the shop itself, the entire property. Upstairs offices, back storage, the lot out back. I used my savings, reinvested profits, and a carefully negotiated loan to close the deal. The deed was signed. I was now a property owner. But I didn't tell them. Not yet. I wanted them to find out the way they had always chosen to treat me. In public. I arrived at the dinner wearing a forest green silk dress and heels I had splurged on just for the occasion. I brought a bottle of vintage wine and a box of handmade truffles from a local chocolatier. As I stepped into the candlelit foyer of my grandmother's estate, I felt the familiar tension creeping into my chest. But I reminded myself, I wasn't here to beg for approval. I was here to reclaim my dignity. Kayla, my mother exclaimed with surprise more than joy. Look at you. It's been, what? Over a year? Aaron greeted me with a nod. Patrick didn't even get up from the couch. Dinner was as pretentious as ever. Long table, silver cutlery, small talk laced with passive judgment. So, Patrick, my grandmother asked loudly enough for everyone to hear, how's the new role at the bank? Oh, it's been incredible, he said, puffing his chest. Just closed a merger last week, 7 figures. We're flying to Napa in January. And Aaron, she continued, your firm's expanding, right? We're opening a branch in Seattle. I might relocate if the offer is right. Then silence. All eyes turned to me. And there it was, the moment they waited for every year, the part where I reminded them of their superiority. "And you, Kayla?" my father asked, with that half-smile that never reached his eyes. "Still serving lattes to hipsters?" Snickers rippled around the table. I looked down at my plate, then slowly raised my gaze. "No, Dad," I said calmly. "I bought the building, my cafe, the offices above it, the lot behind it. It's all mine now." Silence. The kind of silence that stretches and stings. The kind that makes people put down their forks. Aaron blinked. "You... what?" "I own it," I repeated. "The entire property. Closed the deal last week. Here." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the signed deed, neatly folded inside a leather case. I placed it in the center of the table. "In case anyone doubts me." My mother stared at the document like it was a loaded gun. Patrick scoffed under his breath. "Well," my grandmother said, clearing her throat, "that's unexpected." I sipped my wine. "Isn't it?" No one congratulated me. No one toasted. No one even asked how I did it. But I saw it in their eyes. The disbelief, the wounded pride, the cracks forming in their glass castle of judgment. They had spent years calling me broke, a failure, a joke. Tonight, I broke their illusion instead. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about proving them wrong. This was the beginning of something bigger. Because when you spend your whole life underestimated, eventually, you learn how to turn silence into power. And I wasn't done yet. That night didn't end with applause. No one clinked glasses in celebration. No one offered me a hug, or even asked how I managed it. After I laid the property deed on the table, the rest of the dinner felt like walking through a minefield. Each comment laced with tension. Each smile stiff and trembling at the edges. I remember standing by the fireplace afterward, swirling what was left of my wine in a crystal glass, while relatives passed by like I had suddenly become a piece of furniture. A few made small talk. Others avoided eye contact completely. It was as if, by shattering the narrative they had built about me, I had also threatened their comfort, their hierarchy. It was my mother who approached me first, her voice soft, sugary, but her eyes scanning me like a threat. "Kayla," she began, placing a perfectly manicured hand on my arm, "we're all happy for you. Truly. But don't you think it would have been better to share this news privately?" I smiled. "Why? You've criticized me publicly for years." She blinked. "You said my dream was irresponsible in front of uncles and cousins. You called me unstable at a baby shower. And you all sat around this table for years laughing at how I wasted my degree on coffee. So no, Mom. Tonight felt like the perfect place to share my win." She didn't respond. She simply withdrew her hand and walked away, the heels of her shoes clicking faster than usual on the marble floor. It stung, I'll admit that. Part of me had still hoped, deep down, that they would be proud of me, that maybe finally I'd be seen. But it was never about pride. It was about control, and they had lost it. The days following the dinner were strangely quiet. I didn't get any texts or calls. Even the family group chat, usually a place for memes and passive-aggressive jokes, went completely silent. It was almost laughable how my success had sucked the air out of them. But things didn't stay quiet for long. A week later, Aaron showed up at the Green Mug. I saw his black BMW parked out front and watched him walk through the glass doors like he owned the place. He was dressed in business casual, slacks, polished shoes, a coat slung over one shoulder, and looked around with the expression of someone visiting a foreign land. "So this is it?" he said, walking up to the counter. "This is it," I replied, tightening my apron. He nodded slowly. "Not bad. Smells great in here. Kind of rustic. It's coffee, Aaron. Not a steakhouse." He gave a short laugh. "I mean, listen, I came because I wanted to talk. Look, that whole dinner thing caught us off guard. Mom's been in a weird mood ever since. I noticed. I guess what I'm saying is, I admire what you did. You proved us wrong. That takes guts." I studied him. Aaron had never given me so much as a pat on the back. This sudden warmth didn't feel genuine. It felt strategic. "What do you want?" He paused. just for a second, but I saw it. "Well," he started, "Patrick and I were actually discussing the building, the one you bought. We've been thinking, if you're ever open to partnerships or maybe renting out the offices upstairs for one of our side businesses, we'd be interested." There it was. They couldn't celebrate me, but they could try to benefit from me. It wasn't about support. It was about proximity to power. "I'm not renting to family," I said plainly. Aaron raised his eyebrows. "Why not?" "Because none of you believed in me. You didn't support me, you didn't help me, and you certainly didn't respect me. And now that I've built something real, you want to slice it up like you're entitled to it?" He took a deep breath, clearly annoyed. "Kayla, be reasonable. We're talking business, not emotions." "Exactly," I said, locking eyes with him. "And in business, trust is everything. And I don't trust any of you." He left without another word, but he wasn't the only one who came sniffing around. A week after that, Patrick emailed me a pitch for a Morgan Family Cafe expansion plan. He even attached a presentation deck, complete with logo mock-ups and projected revenues, suggesting that the green mug could become a franchise if I allowed them to guide its scalability. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and framed it. I hung it in the back office as a reminder. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted to own what I had fought for. It was around that time that I began to notice small shifts. A few of my best suppliers started experiencing delays. A lease document for the office upstairs suddenly had a missing signature that I was sure had been there before. A city inspector showed up without warning, citing new health code updates. I didn't have to be a genius to see what was happening. They were trying to sabotage me. Not directly, of course. They were too refined for that. But it was happening. Quietly. Strategically. It was war. A polite, well-dressed war with handshakes and smiles and knives hidden in every interaction. So I did what I do best. I paid attention. I tracked every change. Documented every delay. Took pictures. Kept receipts. I called the city and requested full transparency on inspection schedules. I sat down with my lawyer and reviewed every lease, every title, every clause. If they wanted a game, I'd give them a game, but not the one they thought. One night, sitting alone in the shop after closing, I looked around at the space I had built. The worn wooden floors, the plants hanging from the ceiling, the wall of books people donated. It wasn't just a business. It was my story, my sanctuary. My rebellion turned into revenue, and they were trying to stain it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about my coffee shop anymore. This was about making sure they never tried to take anything from me again. I didn't just want to win. I wanted them to regret ever calling me broke. And for that, I needed a plan. The war didn't explode overnight. It simmered. Like the slow hiss of a kettle on a forgotten stove, the heat kept rising until something had to burst. And for me, that moment came one cold Thursday morning in January. I had just finished placing a fresh batch of muffins in the display case when my assistant manager, Danny, walked in holding a pale yellow envelope. "This came for you. No return address," she said, placing it on the counter. The envelope was thick and official-looking. My name was typed in block letters. I hesitated for a moment before tearing it open. As my eyes scanned the contents, a familiar chill crawled up my spine. It was a notice from the city's zoning department. Notice of violation. Unauthorized structural modifications. Penalty. Immediate closure pending review. I reread the words twice, then a third time. My hands tightened around the paper. This didn't make sense. I hadn't made any structural changes. Not without permits. Every renovation I'd ever done was signed off by the city. "Is it serious?" Danny asked, her voice cautious. I nodded slowly, trying to hide the storm brewing behind my eyes. "They're saying we have to shut down temporarily." Her face fell. "But we're finally picking up again after the holidays." I know. It didn't take long to connect the dots. The timing, the quiet threats, the offers disguised as family concern. They couldn't own me, so now they wanted to ruin me. One of them had filed a false complaint. I didn't know who, but I had suspects, and I wasn't going to take it lying down. That afternoon, I drove to the zoning office myself. I met with a city official named Mrs. Landon, a woman with gray hair and sharp glasses who clicked her pen 3 times before speaking. We received an anonymous report that claimed you installed additional plumbing and interior walls without permits. Per protocol, we had to act. There were no new walls. I installed a small utility sink in the back room 6 months ago, but that was permitted. I have the paperwork. I'd like to see that. I handed her the file I'd brought. She leafed through it, nodding once. Then again. This looks in order. So we're fine? She hesitated. I believe you, but now that the complaint has been made, a full inspection is required. For a sink? It's policy. I bit my lip and forced a smile. Fine. Bring your inspector. But let me be clear. This is harassment. And I'm not going to play dead. She looked at me over her glasses. Miss Morgan, I've worked here 23 years. I've seen things like this before. You're not the first woman to build something powerful and make enemies doing it. Just keep everything documented. I left the building with fire in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. By the next morning, I had installed a hidden camera at the back of the shop and started recording all deliveries, visitors, and even casual passers-by. I reviewed my security logs, checked access to my digital systems, and backed up every legal document 3 times over. If they were going to play dirty, I was going to keep my hands clean, but prepared. Then came the second blow. 2 days later, I received a call from my coffee bean supplier, a soft-spoken woman named Carla who had worked with me from the start. I'm so sorry, Kayla, she said, voice trembling. But we have to cut our contract. What? Why? There's been pressure from a larger client. They told us that if we didn't stop supplying you, they'd pull out. Who? I can't say. I already knew. My brother Patrick had connections in the food distribution industry. His wife's family owned a regional supply chain company. He had the reach and the pettiness. I hung up and sat in silence. For the first time in months, doubt crept in like a fog. They weren't just trying to break me. They were trying to erase me. One permit, one supplier, one subtle knife at a time. That night, I drove out of town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I needed air. I needed space to think. I ended up 3 hours away in the mountains, at a quiet inn I used to visit during college. It had a view of the Blue Ridge and a fireplace that crackled like old memories. I sat in that room, staring at the flames, and let the anger settle into something sharper. Not rage, not desperation. Strategy. I started making calls. First, I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in small business defense and property law. Her name was Sharon Duke, older, tough as nails, and with a reputation for exposing municipal corruption and family sabotage alike. Then I contacted a PR consultant I'd met at a local entrepreneur event. If they wanted to ruin my reputation, I'd beat them to the spotlight. I told her I was ready to do interviews, to tell my story as a small business owner facing coordinated attacks from her own family. Next, I called a friend of mine from college, Jordan, who had moved to Atlanta and now worked as a forensic IT specialist. I asked him to audit my business emails and network for any tampering. You think someone got into your system? He asked. I think someone tried. Then I'll find out who. By the time I returned to Asheville 2 days later, I had a plan. And allies. Back at the cafe, Danny ran to meet me. Kayla, you're not going to believe this. A customer came in asking for you. Said he was from a local blog. Wants to feature us. Perfect, I said, my smile returning. Tell him I'm ready. I spent the next week preparing for war, not with threats or confrontation, but with precision. I filed formal complaints with the zoning board, citing harassment and requesting investigation into misuse of anonymous reports. I had Jordan's audit team compile evidence that someone had attempted to access our supplier contracts through a spoofed email. I worked with Sharon to draft cease and desist letters that would go out the moment we had names attached to the threats. And then came the interview. The journalist, a young guy named Miguel, was captivated by the story. So, you're saying your own family is trying to shut you down? I'm saying I built something they couldn't control, and now they're scared of what I've become. He smiled. That's one hell of a headline. Good, I said, because this isn't just a story about coffee. It's about respect. 2 days later, The article went live. From Rejected to Resilient: How One Woman Fought Back Against Family Sabotage and Built a Coffee Empire. It went viral in our city. People came in droves. Customers brought flowers, cards, and solidarity. Local businesses sent messages of support. A lawyer even offered to assist pro bono if I needed further help. But the most satisfying moment came when Aaron walked into the shop one more time. He didn't smile. "You really went to the press?" "I did," I said. "And I'll do it again. You just painted us as villains. You handed me the brush." And as he walked away without another word, I knew the tides had finally shifted. They tried to break me quietly, but I had learned how to roar in silence. The article didn't just light a spark, it lit a firestorm. People from all over Asheville and beyond started showing up at the Green Mug. Some came for the coffee, others came for the story. A few came just to shake my hand and say, "You're brave. Don't let them win." I wasn't used to attention, and I definitely wasn't used to praise. But this was different. This wasn't about being the best barista or running a successful cafe. It was about surviving a system meant to silence you, and somehow rising louder. But with attention came pressure. My inbox overflowed. Local news stations requested interviews. 2 podcast producers reached out. I had to hire Danny's cousin part-time just to help handle the front desk and emails. At night, I barely slept. Not because of fear, but because my mind wouldn't stop racing. I wasn't just defending a business anymore. I was building a movement. And yet, behind every headline, behind every "you're an inspiration" comment, was a constant hum of tension. The inspection from the zoning department still loomed. The permit issue wasn't fully cleared. My supply chain had just stabilized, but I was still working without a contract for some of my key ingredients. It felt like running a marathon with my hands tied. Still, I kept going. Each day, I opened the doors to the Green Mug with a renewed sense of purpose. I changed our motto from "Coffee that warms" to "Coffee that fights back." I printed it on new mugs and had them displayed proudly on the front shelf. We hosted local entrepreneurs for weekly meetups. We offered our upstairs office space, free of charge, to women starting their own businesses. I didn't announce it publicly. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to make sure no one else would feel as alone as I had felt for so many years. Meanwhile, Sharon, my lawyer, was moving like a hawk behind the scenes. She filed 2 legal complaints, one for malicious interference with business operations, and one for attempted defamation. We didn't have names yet, just IP addresses and suspicious digital footprints. But Jordan, my tech guy, kept digging. One day, he called me sounding excited for the first time in weeks. "I got it," he said. "They messed up." "Who?" "Your brother, Patrick. He used his work computer to log into your supplier's system pretending to be you. The audit trail is there. I have screen captures, timestamps, login paths, all of it." I felt my heart punch my ribs. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was truth, cold and traceable. "That's enough to press charges?" I asked. "It's more than enough." Sharon agreed. She scheduled a formal notice to be delivered, but I stopped her. "Not yet." She paused. "Why?" "Because I want him to see me first." That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the cafe after hours, staring out the window while the city darkened and the lights inside glowed warm and golden. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who cried in the back of the shop when she couldn't afford new chairs, the one who flinched every time someone in her family asked, "So, when are you getting a real job?" She wasn't gone, but she had grown teeth, and now she was ready to bite back. The following Saturday, I invited my family to a Morgan family brunch at the Green Mug. It was an open invitation. No context, no agenda, just a date, a time, and the words, "I'd love to see you all." I wasn't sure they'd come, but they did. They always came when there was a stage. My father arrived first, wearing a navy blazer and a confused smile. My mother followed, her hair pulled into a sleek bun, scanning the room as if expecting paparazzi. Aaron and Patrick came in last, whispering something I didn't catch. I had reserved the entire cafe. No other customers, no distractions, just them and me. The place looked beautiful. Plants freshly trimmed, the fireplace lit, tables set with warm pastries and handmade place cards. The staff stayed in the back, watching through the small kitchen window. "Thank you for coming," I said, standing behind the bar. "Please, sit." They did, hesitantly. "What is this?" my mother asked. "A chance," I said, "to clear the air, to say what needs to be said. One last time." I walked around the counter and placed a file folder in front of Patrick. He didn't open it. "You filed a fake complaint with the city. You tampered with my supplier contracts. You impersonated me." His face hardened. "That's ridiculous." "Don't bother lying," I said calmly. "I have forensic proof. I have your work computer's IP. I have timestamps. Jordan traced everything." Everyone went quiet. "I haven't filed charges yet, but I will. Unless—" Patrick looked up, angry now. "Unless what?" "Unless you admit it. Right here, right now. And walk away. From me, from this business, from whatever twisted idea you had of trying to control something you never built." His lips parted, then closed again. He looked at our father, who stared into his coffee cup like it held answers. "You were never supposed to succeed," Patrick muttered. I didn't react. I just nodded. "I know." He stood up abruptly and left. No apology, no remorse. I looked at the others. Aaron cleared his throat. "Kayla, this is all unfortunate." "No," I interrupted. "This is justice. This is what happens when you kick someone long enough. They learn how to stand on bones that healed stronger." I turned to my parents. My voice softened, but didn't waver. "You raised me to believe that love was conditional, that if I didn't fit your mold, I wasn't worth pride or protection. But I've unlearned that. I don't need your approval. I don't need your money. I don't even need your presence." I exhaled slowly. This cafe, this life, I built it alone, and I'm proud of that. You don't have to be. No one said a word. They left, one by one, the door chiming behind them like a funeral bell. But it didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. That night, I locked up the green mug and stepped outside. The sky above Asheville was a shade of purple I hadn't noticed in years. The air was crisp, clean. I pulled my coat tighter and smiled for the first time in days. The war wasn't over, but I had already won the hardest part, believing I deserved to. The brunch had been a reckoning, but it wasn't the final act. In truth, it was only the prelude. Patrick walking out without apology was expected. Aaron's silence was familiar. My parents' discomfort? That was nothing new. But what none of them realized was that I didn't organize that brunch just to clear the air. I did it to set the stage. A week later, I filed the official complaint against Patrick. Identity fraud, business interference, civil damages. My lawyer Sharon delivered it directly to his office. No press, no noise. But that wasn't the end. Not for me. Because while I had the evidence, and the strength, and the public support, there was still something unresolved. Something that had nothing to do with courtrooms or signatures or even justice. It was about truth, and I hadn't told mine yet. Not to the world. Not to the people who deserved to hear it. So I wrote it. Late at night, sitting at the back table of the green mug, I penned a letter, not to my family, but to the people who had walked through my doors for 2 years and helped me survive. The regulars who tipped extra when the heater broke. The poets who performed to empty chairs. The elderly woman who left a prayer card every Sunday on the corner table. The community had built me up. They deserved the truth. So I wrote it all. The rejection. The sabotage. The betrayal. And the decision to finally fight back. I called the piece "The Day They Called Me Broke" and posted it on the Green Mug's website and social media. No pictures, no drama, just my words, raw and unfiltered. It went viral in hours. Comments poured in. "You're a warrior. I needed this today. They tried to destroy you and only made you stronger." Local news picked it up again. This time, national outlets followed. I was invited to speak at a small business conference in Raleigh. A podcast in New York wanted a live interview. A women's leadership magazine asked for a cover story. I should have felt elated, but I was tired. Not from working, but from surviving. from proving myself again and again to people who never intended to listen. So I made a decision. It was time to shift the story. Not just survive, but redefine the ending. The city inspector finally came, clipboard in hand, eyes skeptical as he walked through the shop. I had all my permits ready, all the photographs, every document, laminated and labeled. He walked through each room, nodded slowly, and at the end said, "This place is cleaner than most hospitals, and your paperwork is bulletproof." "So we're cleared?" I asked. "Not just cleared. I'm closing the complaint file personally." A weight lifted from my chest. One less chain. But the chain that mattered most hadn't been broken yet. The one wrapped in my last name. A few days later, I received word that Patrick had filed a motion to dismiss my lawsuit. Typical. Denial was his only defense. But Sharon was ready. She compiled a case so airtight it could have suffocated him. And then, something unexpected happened. Patrick called me. It was 10:13 p.m. I was at home, barefoot in my kitchen, drinking chamomile tea when my phone lit up with his name. I stared at it for a second, then answered. "Kayla, that's brave of you," I said calmly. "Calling me after everything. I wanted to talk. No lawyers. You lost that right 6 years ago, but go on." He took a deep breath. "I don't want this to go to court. I don't want this to blow up." "You mean you don't want the world to see you for who you are?" "I made a mistake. You made several. Repeatedly. And with intention." Silence. "Please," he said. "Let's settle this quietly. What do you want?" I almost laughed. What do I want? I want my family back. I want a mother who doesn't treat love like a currency. A father who sees me without flinching. Brothers who protect instead of sabotage. Another silence. "But we're way past that, aren't we?" I continued. "So here's what I want now. I want you to sign a formal admission of what you did. Publicly. Not just to the court, but to the same community you tried to poison against me. And I want you to pay for the legal costs, the supplier losses, and the inspection delays. In full." He exhaled. "You really want to ruin me?" "No, Patrick," I said. "You ruined yourself. I'm just giving you the mirror." I hung up. He didn't call again. A week later, we received notice. Patrick had agreed to settle. In full. Every term. Every dollar. He would also issue a formal letter of apology, to be posted publicly on all Morgan family business platforms. It wasn't vindication. It was victory. Not because I had destroyed him, but because I hadn't let him destroy me. The last piece of the puzzle was my parents. They hadn't spoken to me since the brunch. No emails, no visits, and I hadn't reached out either. Until one afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From my father. The handwriting was shaky, not from age, but from something deeper. Maybe regret. He wrote, "Kayla, I read your post. I read every word, and I won't defend myself. You deserved better from me. You always did. I don't know how to be a good father to the woman you've become, because I never understood the girl you were, but I want to learn, if you'll let me. Your mother may not be there yet, but I am trying. Dad." I read it 5 times, and cried each time, because as much as I wanted revenge, what I had wanted more was to be seen, to be acknowledged, to not feel like I had to break myself into pieces to be worthy of love. And finally, I had something real. Not perfection, not restoration, but the start of something honest. I stood outside the Green Mug one Sunday morning, just as the sun peeked through the buildings. The street was quiet, still wrapped in early light. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and espresso was already dancing through the air. I looked up at the sign. Not just a cafe anymore. It had become a symbol. A scar turned into a badge. A whisper turned into a roar. And I had done that. Me. The girl they called broke. The woman who proved them wrong, not with spite, but with strength. The morning after my father's letter, I sat by the large window in my apartment, the one that overlooked the quiet streets just above downtown Asheville. The light filtered in through gauzy curtains, brushing softly across my skin like an invitation to begin again. It was the first time in years I didn't wake up with the weight of something heavy on my chest. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally true. I spent the day alone, not in sadness, but in silence, in peace. The kind of peace that only comes after a storm has passed and left you standing, bruised but whole. I cleaned my apartment slowly, watered the plants, baked bread for no reason other than I wanted to. My phone buzzed several times. Interview requests, messages from customers, even a few from people I hadn't heard from in years. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the cafe. The bell above the door chimed the way it always did, like an old friend greeting me. Danny looked up from the counter and smiled. "You look different." "I feel different," I said. She slid over a latte without asking. "They've been asking for you." "Let them wait," I said with a wink. She laughed. Business was booming. The tables were full, the shelves almost empty, and the tips overflowing. But the energy inside the green mug had changed. It wasn't just a coffee shop anymore. It was a community, a conversation, a movement. There was laughter now where once there had been only background noise. There were strangers talking like old friends. There were murals on the wall painted by local artists and bulletin boards covered in thank you notes, poetry, and scribbled confessions. A little boy ran past me with a hot chocolate mustache. His mom mouthed, "Sorry," and I smiled. No apology needed. This place was meant for joy. The zoning board sent a follow-up letter officially closing the case. No fines, no penalties. In fact, they thanked me for my organization, for my professionalism, and for my grace under pressure. It felt surreal reading those words. Grace. That wasn't how I'd ever been described growing up. I was always the difficult one, the rebel, the ungrateful daughter. But now, here I was, standing in the same body, with the same name, and yet finally being called something different, something real. Patrick never tried to contact me again. His apology went up online, as agreed. It was cold, corporate, and clearly written by a legal assistant. But it was public, and it was enough. Word got out quickly in our extended family. Some were stunned. Others quietly reached out to say they'd always admired my resilience but didn't know how to say it. I didn't respond to most of them, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed their approval. Aaron surprised me, though. One day, he showed up again, not in his BMW, but on foot, in jeans and a hoodie. He waited in line like everyone else, ordered a drip coffee, sat near the window for almost 2 hours, reading. Just reading. Before he left, he came up to the counter and said, "I was wrong. About all of it." Then he walked out. That meant more than any formal apology ever could. My mother didn't reach out. Not after the brunch, not after the article, not after the letter from my father. But I knew she'd read it all. I knew she had seen my face on television and in the magazines, had heard the whispers at church or the silence at family dinners when someone mentioned my name. And that was enough for me. For now. I no longer carried the hope that she'd change. But I also no longer carried the burden of trying to be someone she could accept. That, in itself, was freedom. My relationship with my father began to thaw. Slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. He started sending me handwritten notes every couple of weeks. Small things. Book recommendations. Newspaper clippings. Even recipes. It was strange at first. But there was a sincerity in his effort that I recognized. Maybe for the first time, he was learning how to be a father to a daughter he didn't understand, but finally respected. I took one of his recipes, a lemon pound cake, and started making it on Saturdays. Customers loved it. I called it Gerald's cake on the menu. He didn't know. I didn't tell him. Some things don't need announcements. Some things just are. And as for me, I kept building. Not out of spite, not out of fear, but out of love. For what I had created, for who I had become. I launched a second location in the spring, across town. It was bigger, with space for workshops, live music, and even a small bookstore corner. I partnered with a local nonprofit to offer free business classes to women starting over. Divorcees, single moms, immigrants. I knew what it was like to start from nothing. I wanted to be the person I never had. I wrote more. Essays, speeches, even a small book. It wasn't a memoir. It was a guide for others like me. I called it Start anyway. Because that's what I did. And that's what I would tell anyone with a fire inside them that no one else could see. Start anyway. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. That part of the story was done. The wounds had healed into scars, and the scars had become stories, and the stories had become my power. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. But I never forgot. Because memory doesn't fade. It transforms. And every time someone called me brave, I remembered the girl crying in the storage room because she couldn't afford new chairs. Every time someone asked me for advice, I remembered the silence of family dinners, the cruel jokes, the eyes that looked past me. Every time someone praised my resilience, I remembered being called broke, like it was a curse. Now it was a crown. That fall, I stood in front of a crowd at a business summit in Atlanta. There were hundreds of people, lights, cameras, microphones. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I told my story, not just the pain, but the process. Not just the struggle, but the stretch. I talked about the power of silence, of choosing yourself even when no one else does, of building a life brick by brick with nothing but your bare hands and your stubborn heart. When I finished, they stood. But it wasn't the applause I remembered most. It was the look on the face of a young girl in the third row, maybe 19, maybe 20, eyes wide, shoulders back, mouth open like she had just discovered something she'd been looking for her whole life. That's why I did it. That's why I fought. Not to destroy them, but to free me. And maybe, to show her she could be free too. 3 years later, a small girl named Nora stood in the middle of the Green Mug's original location, twirling in her red raincoat while her mother sipped an oat milk cappuccino near the fireplace. Nora loved this place. She said it smelled like happiness. Her mother, Tasha, was one of the first women to complete the business mentorship program I'd created. Now she owned a thriving floral shop 3 blocks away. She still sent me bouquets every Friday. And Nora always picked the colors. The cafe had changed, but not in the way people think when they hear that word. The soul remained. The same brick walls, the same warmth in the lighting, the same books lining the shelves, now joined by newer ones written by people who used to be customers, employees, or mentees. I walked through the space like someone walking through a memory still in motion. It was living, breathing proof that scars could grow gardens. We now had 4 locations, each one slightly different, shaped by the communities that surrounded them. One had a podcast studio in the back. Another had a rooftop garden. The most recent had a dedicated children's reading nook with beanbags and local volunteers who read every Saturday morning. It wasn't just business anymore. It was purpose. And it was legacy. I no longer worked behind the counter, but I showed up every day. I wasn't ready to be absent from what I built. I didn't want to become a figurehead in a glossy photo on a wall. I wanted to keep touching what I loved. Sometimes I brought in muffins. Sometimes I just sat quietly and watched people laugh and cry and plan and pause over a cup of coffee. That was always the goal, to create a space where real life could unfold. Uninterrupted, unapologetic. My father still wrote me letters. We never had the tearful reunion Hollywood scripts are made of. But he tried. And trying, for a man like him, was a revolution. Once he even stopped by the cafe unannounced, just to see what it felt like. He sat in a corner with a lemon pound cake and watched the world move around him. Before he left, he hugged me. Not tightly, not long, but enough. I didn't ask him to come back, but I think he will. My mother stayed silent. She never wrote, never called. Occasionally, I heard through cousins that she kept up with the news, that she watched my interviews, that she cut out articles about the cafe and kept them in a drawer. That was her way. She had built her own armor out of pride and distance, and I stopped trying to reach through it. I had my closure, and I had my peace. Aaron and I speak occasionally, mostly short, thoughtful exchanges. Once he invited me to speak at a leadership seminar his company was hosting. I declined, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to become a trophy. My journey wasn't for their display. It was for the people who truly needed it. Patrick? I never saw him again. Last I heard, he left the city, changed jobs, and remarried. I sometimes wonder if he ever thinks about what he did. I don't wonder long. I don't owe him space in my mind anymore. 1 year after the lawsuit settled, I opened a small foundation under the radar. Nothing flashy. Just quiet funding for women trying to start over. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't want headlines. I just wanted to give other people a fighting chance. Every time someone receives a microloan, every time a dream is quietly saved from extinction, it feels like I'm speaking to the younger version of myself, the one crying in silence, terrified of failing without anyone there to catch her. I'm not sure if that girl is fully gone, but she's no longer alone. I moved into a small house just outside the city. It's nothing like the mansions my family used to dream about. It's modest, surrounded by trees and wildflowers, with creaky floors and a front porch swing I often fall asleep in with a book open on my chest. There's a garden out back where I grow herbs and tomatoes, and sometimes sit barefoot in the dirt just to remember what it feels like to be grounded. The kind of home that doesn't shout, but whispers. The kind that holds you instead of displaying you. At night, I still write, sometimes for myself, sometimes for others. My second book is about the invisible battles women fight every day, the ones that never make headlines but shape them just the same. My publisher wants to title it Quiet Power. I like that. It reminds me of how my vengeance wasn't loud. It wasn't chaos. It was steady, strategic, satisfying. A war won not with screams, but with truth. That's the kind of power I believe in now. People often ask me if I forgave my family. I never know how to answer. Forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a process, an unfolding, a choice you keep making even when the anger returns like a ghost. But I let go of the need for revenge a long time ago. Not because they deserved mercy, but because I deserved peace. That was the gift I gave myself. That was the story I rewrote. Sometimes I still remember the moment it all turned. That dinner, that insult, that instant where the word broke became a spark instead of a shame. It's strange how moments like that, so small, so cruel, can split your life in two. Before and after. Weak and strong. Silenced and heard. Now, when I hear someone being dismissed, doubted, or belittled, I feel that old fire stirring again. Not to burn, but to build, to lift, to prove. Because no one else should have to bleed just to be seen. No one should have to beg to belong. And if I can be the voice that tells them, you matter, then everything I endured will have been worth it. The green mug remains a symbol of more than caffeine. It's resilience in a cup. It's every no that became a louder yes. It's the girl they mocked growing into the woman they could never break. It's a daily reminder that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right when no one else dares to believe. One evening, just as the cafe was closing, I sat by the window with Danny, sipping tea as the sky blushed into twilight. She looked at me and asked, "If you could go back and do it differently, would you?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said softly, "because every bruise became a blueprint. Every scar pointed me forward, and every time they tried to bury me, they were handing me the soil I needed to grow." She smiled. "You're not just a survivor, Kayla. You're a storm." I looked out the window, where a little girl named Nora was twirling again in her red coat, completely unaware of how powerful a moment like this could be. Maybe someday she'd tell her own story, and maybe it would start the same way mine did. They called me broke, but they had no idea what I was about to become. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most? Have you ever had to fight quietly, patiently, to reclaim your voice and your worth? If Kayla's story moved something in you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of resilience, self-respect, and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their silence doesn't mean weakness, and that it's never too late to rise. Leave a comment below. Have you ever turned someone's doubt into your greatest strength? We'd love to hear your journey. Thank you for watching. And remember, your value isn't defined by who doubts you. It's revealed when you refuse to let them win.